Hi, this is Adam Elio Berkowitz. I have a really special guest with me, Jason Hensley. Jason Hensley is a very prolific author. On his web page, he says he has a PhD in Holocaust and genocide studies. He also has what's a DMin?
The D-Min is a doctorate of ministry.
A Doctor of Ministry in Biblical Studies. And that includes both Jewish and Christian scriptures. Um, and he has an MA in biblical languages. Do you speak Hebrew?
Katsat.
Okay. Wow. Second MA in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. And he has a third MA in special education. And the first time I connected with Jason was gosh, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
He wrote a book about the Christadelphians, which in a little bit you're going to tell me more about the Christadelphians, who after Kristallnacht in 1938, Britain realized there was something going on, so they made what's called the Kindertransport, and they transported over 10,000 Jewish children from Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Germany, and they brought them to London. And they thought it was going to be temporary, but because no one saw the Holocaust coming, or very few people did, and the children stayed with the families, with Christadelphian families, and also with Jewish families. I found out, but the Christadelphians took these children in. They did not convert them or preach to them. They did it strictly to save the children out of the real depth of their hearts. It was a beautiful thing. And he wrote a book about that called Part of the Family, the Kinder Transport, and how it saved so many children, so many Jewish children. And he reconnected with me because he just came out with a new book, which I already ordered because it's amazing. Oh, I'm sorry, not that book. It's called One Family: Rediscovering Christianity's Relationship with Judaism. And I'm sure it's textually based, but before we jump into the book, I'd like to hear a little bit about what Christadelphians are, Jason, because I know because I read about it, it's a beautiful thing, but not too many people have heard of Christadelphians. So
That's
who are
true.
you guys?
So Christadelphians are a group that started in the mid 1850s, and it really started with the writing of a book. So the book written was entitled Elpis Israel. And the reason I bring up the title is because Elpis in Greek means hope. So the title of the book is The Hope of Israel. So it was
Beautiful.
founded in the 1850s, pushing this idea of the hope of Israel. And the reason it was started as a Christian sect, a new Christian sect, was really because the founder, his name was John Thomas, he felt that the focus on Israel had been lost within Christianity. So he read through the Bible and he came to the conclusion that Israel, that the whole Bible is about Israel, right? And he's reading through the whole thing, and it's clear to him. And yet, when he talks to people about it, a lot of Christians have no idea about the Israel connection. So he starts this with this book, The Hope of Israel, to really emphasize that Christianity flows out of Judaism, and that there's a key connection there. So for years, Christadelphians have had a focus on helping bring back a Jewish population to the land, donating to Zionist funds, all of those sorts of things.
When did you? This was the 1870, you said?
1848 was when the book was written.
1848, 100
Yeah,
years before it actually became a reality. That's certainly prophetic.
it's it's pretty crazy. I was just looking at it, and there's a section near the end of that book, Elpis Israel, where he writes and he says, biblically, the Jews must return to the land, right? And he makes that very clear, and he says it's going to happen soon. And he says Britain is going to be one of the main nations involved, which I was reading
Really?
it thinking like, whoa, this is crazy, right? 1848, Britain had nothing to do with Palestine. So it's pretty, it was really interesting for me to see that. But that was all based on how he read the Hebrew prophets.
On in retrospect, hindsight is 2020. Any person who really believes in the Bible, um, at that time would have thought the same thing, because the
Yeah.
prophets are talking about Israel coming back, and lo and behold, here we are. So there's a built-in Zionism in the Christadelphian approach, correct?
Yes. Yes. Just because of a recognition of what the prophets wrote, right? It wasn't necessarily a political sort of thing. It was really more like a faith-based, this is what we've read, and therefore this is what we know will happen. And so when they did start to see it happen, right, then Christadelphian said, what can we do to further this?
There aren't very many Christadelphians, are there?
There's about 50,000 worldwide or so. I'm in North America, and we have probably about 5,000 in the continent. So yeah, it's not huge.
Wow. How did you hear about this?
About Christadelphians,
Yeah.
I was born into it. So I was
Oh, you
born
were
into the
born?
church.
Really?
Born in the church. Yep.
Wow. I would not have guessed that. It's just that's fantastic. So let's jump right into the book, because like I said, I already ordered it. Um, one family, I'll read what it says in Amazon. It says Christianity and Judaism are two separate religions with two separate approaches to life. Nevertheless, they've often operated in similar spheres, and we've interacted over the centuries, and sometimes tragically. Um, but Christian anti-Judaism did not always exist. Originally, Christianity shared its history with Judaism. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you see the connection with Judaism as making you a better Christian.
Yes. Yes. I think that it's imperative for Christians to understand. I don't think, and I've often said this, I teach classes on this, and I go around and I lecture wherever people will have me, right? So I've done it at senior centers and at churches and whatnot, synagogues. And I say to people, you cannot understand Jesus unless you understand him as a Jew. I think that is such a key thing to recognize, because everything in the world of Jesus was Jewish. Everything that he talked about had to do with Judaism. It was all in a Jewish context. And so for years and years, Christians tried to separate him from that. And that ultimately led to a poor relationship with Judaism, and to not really, I think, grasping what what Christianity was supposed to be about.
Jason, I really like you, so I'm gonna do what we call in Israel, speaking arba einaim, four eyes, meaning eye to eye, throwing it all out on the table. Um, there are a few things about that are built into Christianity by the church that have, I think, prevented or made the this meeting of Jews and Christians difficult. Um, One of them is replacement theology,
Yeah.
where um, so tell me what your experience with replacement theology was.
So growing up a Christadelphian, I didn't know about replacement theology. So
Right.
that fascinating to me, right? So this all stems from when I went to get my doctorate at Gratz College in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. I was blown away to see how a lot of Christians understood the relationship with Jews. So that was really shocking to me. And that's when I started to learn about replacement theology. And as I became more aware of it, I started to see it in different places. Not really in my own church, but just in interactions that I would have with people.
It's my experience also. It's very insidious. The church had a lot of time to, we would say, embedded in the kishkas, and you're in the intestines of the religion. And I
Yeah.
think to the detriment of Christians' understanding of Jesus.
Yes, I think totally.
So
And their misunderstanding of the entire biblical schema, like that, you lose it. One thing that really shocked me as my eyes became open to this, I had been reading from an Oxford Bible, right, published at Oxford University, and I had been reading from it since I was a little kid. And I opened up to the prophet Isaiah, and I was reading Isaiah chapter 60. And it starts by saying, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen on you." Like it's this beautiful prophecy. And if you read through it, it's about Jerusalem. It very clearly says you will be called the Zion of the Lord, right? Like it's clear it has to be about Jerusalem. But for years, the heading on my Bible, I'd always seen it. The heading on my Bible said, "The glories of the church in the future age." And
right.
finally, like it hit me, like this has been here, and I hadn't even noticed. Like it's in my Bible, right? Like not even just people teaching it to me, but it was just there in the text I was reading.
Right. I've experienced um, having Christians connecting with Christians in Israel, and they literally cannot see the land in front of them.
Yeah,
They don't understand that the places in the Bible they're walking in them. They can't even see it. And that's a
yeah,
direct result of replacement theology. Just in short, in one sentence, um, replacement theology is taking Israel, which is a nation and a people and a land, and every time you see it in the Bible, it's the church, replacing it with the church, and that the church has replaced Israel in the covenant.
yes.
And that
Sometimes
actually,
you hear people. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, like we just saw the example you gave so beautifully illustrates how it it destroys learning of the Bible, learning of the simple text.
Yeah, yeah. One of the one of the things I've really tried to push in the classes that I give on this is I try to spend a lot of time looking at the writings of Paul because Paul quotes the Hebrew prophets all over the
Shaul,
place.
we call him
Yeah,
Shaul. We,
yeah, that's yes. So looking at show,
yeah,
but
Shaul.
it's fascinating because he quotes the Hebrew prophets all the time and he applies them to the church. But the reason that this is so intriguing to me, and this is like the crux of it in my mind, is that it's clear when he's writing that he's not writing it in a replacement sense. He clearly thinks that those prophecies will literally be fulfilled, but he's saying, here's another spiritualized meaning of it. And I think that that's key because it's not a this meaning is replacing the other one. It's the other one's still going to happen, but here's another one, another idea. And I think that is one of the huge things for Christians to recognize when they're reading that their scriptures aren't replacing Israel. That doesn't make any sense because they were written by a group of Jews. So the group of Jews is not going to say, "Oh, Israel, they have no more relationship or anything like that." Instead, they're saying, "Yes, they have that, and that's going to happen. And here's a spiritual meaning to this that applies to Christians as well."
Having multiple interpretations or even multiple levels of understanding the text, it's a very Jewish thing. Um,
Yes.
that's the way we used to do it. If you look at what we call mikraot gedolot, which I don't know how you would translate it, the big writings, the way we study Bible or the way we study the Torah, you have the Torah text in the middle, and all around it you have like 10 different interpretations of it. And that's just the beginning. There's also the Midrash, and a lot of Christians don't understand the Talmud and even the Zohar is mostly um, commentaries on
Yes.
the Bible, or they certainly are rooted and refer to and are embedded um, in the Bible. Um,
Which is interesting because I think we have that in Christianity as well, but it's less known. I almost feel like in Judaism it's sort of a thing of pride that here we have all these different interpretations for this passage. That's pretty cool, right? That we've like thought about it.
Mm.
And in Christianity, it's almost like, well, no, there's the one that's right, right? Like that's I
Oh,
think often
really?
how people approach it. That all these different Christian groups, they have their interpretation of a passage, but only one of those can be right. And
That that is a total shocker to me. I cannot relate to it on any level. It is not the way we study the text.
yeah, it's a very different approach. And I understand the idea of there being one correct answer. I think that that makes sense, but I think, like you said, there's multiple layers. So it's not necessarily that they're all wrong, but it's almost like there could be multiple interpretations of a passage, and they
Mhm.
all can actually fit together rather than just you've got to push them all out and there can only be
Right.
one.
They even when they contradict each other, they actually complement each other.
Yes.
And lead to a deeper understanding. It's almost like I think of it as like, the parable of a bunch of blind men investigating an elephant. They're touching it. One says, "Oh, it's a tree." The other
Right.
one grabs when he grabs the legs, the other one grabs the tail and says it's a rope. The other one grabs the trunk and says, "Oh, it's a huge snake." The ears are huge leaves. Um, there are we have a saying that there are 70 faces to the Torah.
Mm.
So that's how we approach it. So do you study Jewish texts as well?
I do study Jewish texts. I read a little bit. I do a little bit of Daf Yomi
Whoa.
um each
For
day.
those who don't know, Daf Yomi is studying a one page, like one side of one page of the Talmud a day, which may not sound like a lot, but it is a grueling pace. It is
And I don't do the whole thing, right? I couldn't spend that
it's
much time.
grueling.
But
It's totally grueling. It's unnatural.
I look at a little bit of it at each day. And yeah, sometimes I feel like my brain's gonna melt out of my head after I'm looking at some of these things. I'm like, whoa, man, that's a lot to think about. But I enjoy it because I really feel on fire for this idea of trying to understand the differences between Christianity and Judaism and really trying to bring Christianity back to where it came from. Because I feel like we're really missing big pieces of what Christianity was supposed to be.
I've encountered a stigma amongst Christians towards what we call the oral tradition and the Talmud. Is that, would you say that's accurate, that there's a stigma?
Yeah, I think so, and that itself probably does stem from the Christian text. Um, there's a handful of times when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, like Matthew 15, Mark 7. Those are two parallel records. But he says you hold to the tradition of the elders rather than what Moses wrote. Right. So there does appear in in the gospel accounts to be a little bit of a tension there with the oral Torah. At the same time, I think it's helpful for Christians to be familiar with it, just because that was the world that Jesus lived in, right? It's the way to understand what's
And that
happening in
was
the
that was the basis of his connection to God, was through the rabbinic tradition.
right,
I mean, that's a I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of Christians to hear.
which
Um,
is why he's called rabbi multiple times and by his followers.
sure. I haven't learned the entire New Testament. Maybe one day you and I will get a study session
There we
going.
go. That's fun.
Uh, but the when I did learn the New Testament, everything he spoke about, I was familiar with from Jewish tradition.
Yes.
I mean, when I learned in yeshiva in Gush Etzion, and when Jesus was baptized, and the heavens opened up, I'm like, dude, I have jumped into an ice cold spring at 5 in the morning, and yes, the heavens do open up. I mean, the, the the baptism was the Jewish tradition of what we call toiveling, jumping in a mikveh, and
Yes,
it's a very strong tradition. It's a spiritual practice. It's not just for ritual and purity. So I was very familiar with that. There were a lot of things. His approach to Shabbat was very rabbinic, actually. He
yes,
didn't cancel out the Shabbat. He was actively engaged in understanding Shabbat and as a practice, as a spiritual practice. Um,
yes.
there are any number of examples of that surprised me. I'm like, yeah, me too. You
Oh,
know?
awesome. I absolutely love it. It blows away my students when they see it. I was teaching yesterday, and I said, you read through the Gospels, and I gave a handful of passages that they can read, and I said, you look at those, and you will notice that in Christians' minds, Jesus argued about whether or not you should follow Shabbat. That's not true.
Right, right.
When you read it, he didn't argue about whether or not you should follow it. He argued about what it meant, right? And the question was, how do you follow it, right? It was very clearly in the middle of a Pharisaic debate on what is the spirit behind this, right? What how do we follow this idea? So yeah, I find that to be incredibly exciting. You know, I mean, it's the reason that Jesus, when he's asked what's the greatest commandment, it's the reason that he recites the Shema, right? Like he's he's very much within that world, and I think we miss a lot because we don't recognize that.
I was I was I merited in interviewing Professor Shaul Magid, who
Mm,
wrote a translation of a book. I have it right here. Um, the book is called "The Bible, the Talmud, and the New Testament." It's an English translation of Rav Elijah Tzvi Soloveitchik's commentary on the Gospels, and it was
oh,
written in
interesting.
like 1880, I think. And one of the things he said was Judaism has become very standardized thanks to Maimonides his
Right.
standardizing halacha, and then what we call the Shulchan Aruch, which was written by Rav Yosef Karo. It's very standardized, um, but it didn't used to be that way. So when Jesus is discussing whether it was permitted to pluck kernels of wheat on Shabbat, he wasn't saying, "Oh, you can do anything you want on Shabbat." He was
Right.
giving his interpretation of what was permitted on Shabbat, and it was well within, well
Yes.
within the sphere of Jewish interpretation.
Yes.
It was what we call pikuach nefesh, saving a soul. You're hungry, you're out in the field. That's dangerous. Eat. So
Yes.
it is a rabbinic process. So I looked at that. I'm like, wow, that could have been a rabbi. That was
Yeah.
so
Yeah. It's really it's very powerful. And I think the ultimate conclusion when that's not recognized is a lot of Jesus's words, his debates with the Pharisees are misunderstood because it was an intra-Jewish debate where he was saying, this is my interpretation, I disagree with your interpretation. Right. And that's what was going on between him and that group of people that he was talking to at that point. And yet, I think a lot of people, instead of Pharisees, they read Jews. And
right.
so they see Jesus as arguing and condemning Jews, not knowing, what the Bible really means, kind of thing.
Or
So
Jewish practice.
or Jewish practice, yes. Yeah. So that's a big challenge because if we don't get this right, it has big implications for how Christians understand Judaism.
Yeah, and it's funny we were talking about Jesus' ruling about how to observe Shabbat, and I really, as a Jew, I feel the biggest separation, the thing that yanked Christians away from Torah and from their Jewish roots and from the Jewish roots of Jesus is when they moved away from Shabbat, when they moved away from the seventh day being the Sabbath, and they chose the first day. I think that was really I could be wrong. I'd be interested to hear from more Christians about that, but I think that was the so. Do you keep Shabbat or do you keep Sunday?
Ah, I keep Sunday. Yes.
Okay, I'm not,
Um,
no judgment.
but
I was just
well, the here's what I think is interesting. I think in my understanding, it sort of happened as a unit. It was because when you look at the book of Acts, which describes Jesus's followers after after he's gone, right? You have you still have them following Shabbat. So that's intriguing. Like they walk with him to the Mount of Olives, and it specifically says, it's Acts chapter 1. It says it was only a Sabbath day's journey away, as though the writer there wanted to make sure that you understood they didn't break Shabbat. And then in a passage that's about the destruction of the second temple, it specifically says, pray that this that you'll be able to leave and that it doesn't happen on Shabbat. I think implying that there were a lot of followers who did still hold to that.
hmm.
So it's interesting to see that. It seems to me that the big thing that happens is that in 70 CE, when the Romans destroy the second temple, a lot of Christians had worshipped there, and they're trying to figure
Yeah.
out, what do we do now? Right? Just kind of like all of Judaism was trying to sort out, what do we do without the second temple? And the interpretation that came out is really, I think, the beginning of this anti-Jewish feeling of, well, this was God's judgment on Judaism, and so we're going to move away from that. I think that's
Hmm.
sort of where
Yeah,
that ended
that's
up going. And then to your point though, I think rabbinic Judaism ended up focusing more on Shabbat, since there were certain things that couldn't be followed, like the offerings and whatnot. And Christians had really pushed away from that idea of focusing on Shabbat.
Judaism itself. Yeah, it's funny. I often wonder, and this is a strange thing to wonder, what would have, I mean, it's fascinating that Jesus was so connected to the temple,
Yeah.
and then the temple was destroyed not long after his death, which was it after? It was after his death, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. About 40 years after.
So I often wonder what would have happened had the temple not been destroyed. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting
because
question.
early Christianity was not really outside the realm of Judaism. You
Right.
know, at the time there were Essenes, there were a lot of different practices going on that were much further outside than Christianity. And had the temple not been destroyed and had the Jews not gone into exile, and I live up north in Israel. There are a lot of cities that Jews and Christians and the early Christians coexisted, and there are no problems, you know.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. It is an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. I don't know. Because that really seems to be the separation point when
yeah,
Christians go one way and they sort of push the Jewish roots in a different way. But I mean, when you read all the early Christian texts, like in the Christian scriptures, there is not they're not anti-Jewish,
not at
and I
all.
think that
Not-
that's a fascinating thing for a lot of Christians to realize, because they just have kind of taken this as, oh, this is tradition, it must be in the Christian scriptures.
and I haven't really, well, I've been told I haven't yet gotten to the parts of the New Testament that would be problematic for Jews.
Mm,
I haven't yet. I'm sure I'm going to run across them. I've been told they're there, but as a Jew reading it, first of all, I, I, it's not changing my belief as a Jew.
right.
Um, and it's really, I see how Judaism and Christianity are so similar in their roots. Um,
Yeah.
of course, there are differences, of course.
Yep. Yep.
What's fascinating to me about your description of the connection to Israel in the Christadel among the Christadelphians, is it's very different than the connection to Israel by the evangelicals today. First of all, it's historically goes back much further.
Hmm.
Evangelicals are much more recent. Also, I think it seems to me that for the Christadelphians, it's embedded in the text,
Yes.
the connection to Israel. It's not like political Zionism. So could you describe me how you think it might be different than what the average evangelical would see as a connection to Israel?
Yeah. So this has been something really powerful for me in teaching the classes that I teach because a lot of my students are Christians. And uh, I have found that for Christadelphians, the Jewish scriptures are a key part of their identity, and that's not really as much of a
Hmm.
thing within evangelicalism. I mean, it is, but I think for the average evangelical, it's not.
I
Um,
hear that. I've frequently been. It amazes me that my Christian friends can certainly cite chapter and verse in the prophets much better than I can. But when it comes to the five books of Moses, the Torah, I'm
right.
sometimes shocked at how it's almost foreign to them.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It I one of the things that was really interesting to me was that the Christadelphians have a Bible reading planner. So the whole group of Christadelphians reads this. It's not like you have to, right? It's not a forced thing, but a lot of people do, and it's a Bible reading planner that takes you through the Hebrew scriptures once a year and the Christian scriptures twice a year. Now it's not because we think that the Christian scripture is twice as good or something like that. It's just because it's shorter. So that's the reason that was twice. But what that does is it means that there's a lot of Christadelphians, if they're 50, 60 years old, that they've read the entirety of the Hebrew scriptures like 50 times, right, in their life. And so there's
When
a
you say the
neat.
Hebrew scriptures, you include the prophets and the writings, correct?
Yeah, so yeah, Torah, Ketuvim, Nevi'im, yeah, so all of them together.
That's a lot of study.
It's a lot of reading, yeah, but it's really felt. There's a very strong. When I was in seminary, I also found this interesting. There's a very strong push on understanding the whole Bible as a unit, and this feeling that the entire Bible fits together. Whereas I think for a lot of evangelical groups, the focus is more on what does this passage say, and then interpreting out from there. Whereas the Christadelphian approach is to attempt to understand it all at once and interpret the individual passages in light of that framework.
Yeah, we read the weekly parsha, the weekly portion of the Torah. Um,
Right.
and it serves a lot of purposes. One is even in the exile in the diaspora where we're spread all over, there's a unity.
Yes.
We're all literally on the same page, like quite literally.
Aha,
Um,
that's right.
and it really, and also there's a lot of, it gives it, like, for example, we'll look at the politics and we'll try to see if there's a correlation to the weekly portion. And
Mm,
it makes the Torah live, because you're
yeah.
looking for it in your everyday life. Um, and that's, I think, and it's, you find it more often than not. Um, I will say that I spent way too many years learning in yeshiva, which was a lot of learning Talmud, a lot of learning halakha, the Jewish law. But the yeshiva tradition has much less emphasis, as I said, on pardon me, on the prophets and on the writings.
Mm,
And I've heard people say that they believe the reason for that is that it is an exile tradition. It isn't, if you're sitting there in Poland in the cold and you're learning and you're waiting for the Cossacks to come over the hill and attack the shtetl, attack the Jewish ghetto. It's a little painful to read about King David and heroes.
Interesting.
It's just it's too foreign, and it's even painful. And there's
Right.
been a big resurgence amongst the religious Zionists
Ah,
yeshivas. So yeah,
interesting.
yeah, to
Yeah, that makes sense.
learn, yeah, exactly, to learn prophets, and they have, yearly national quizzes, that are, because we're living it, we're living it. I live in the Golan. The Golan is what we call it today, but it's actually the Bashan. It's the
Oh,
portion of
hey, I didn't know
Menashe.
that.
Yeah,
Ah,
the
yeah.
Golan is the Bashan.
Oh,
I'm very
interesting.
proud of that. Giants walked here. You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, Jerusalem is Jerusalem. When you touch the stones, it amazed me when I went up to the Temple Mount. They didn't take building material up there. There was plenty of building material up there that they just picked up and used to build the Muslim structures.
Mm.
You go there, there's like, it looks like a museum. You have, columns that have fallen, and have you been?
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'd love to go up with you.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and it looks like, yeah, we're gonna get together. Um, and it's because it's the land, it's real. And when you read about Jerusalem, it's Jerusalem. When you read about Hebron, it's Hebron. It's the place that Abraham bought.
Yes.
It's the real deal. That's another criticism I have of Christians who come to Israel, is too frequently they treat it almost as, and I think this is as an offshoot of replacement theology, they don't actually see what's in front of them. They come to
Yes.
see what they expected to see. But what Israel is today is an extension. It's the continuation of the Bible. We're living, the next chapter.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good way of putting it. I love that.
And so if they came here and they actually saw what was happening, it would not be what they expected. And it would really open up their mind, open up their eyes, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
The desert's blooming.
the
It's the
the
idea.
desert's booming. The Jews are back in Hebron. It's interesting. Like, most Christians who come to Israel will go to Jerusalem, but not so many will go to Hebron.
Right.
And they'll come up to the north, to the Galilee, where Jesus' stomping grounds. But there are a lot of other places that had biblical relevance, biblical importance, that they won't go to.
And I think that's really that leads, yeah, to exactly what we're looking at. That for a lot of Christians, Hebron has nothing to do with anything. They don't even think about the fact that that was a major biblical city, right? They don't think about how
Right.
that's where David's kingdom started. That's where Abraham and Sarah were. Like, but but I feel like if we can continue to open up to Christianity, that this is where your religion came from, right? Like
Right.
your originated here, and that you have a connection to these stories too, not in a replacement kind of way, but that this is, the roots of Christianity are rooted in this text. So I think that's a big thing.
If yes, and they have a relevance to the actual land today. Like,
Yes.
if I don't know, I would think if I was a Christian, I would want to go to the Temple Mount, because you would be walking precisely where Jesus walked. You would
Yes.
be praying precisely, not in
Yeah.
a, not in an allegorical fashion, but in a physical fashion.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
would be
Literally
you would be
where Jesus
praying
was.
where he
Yes.
prayed, where he prayed. It's amazing. And even like we were talking about how the New Testament is based, um I mean, because Jesus was Jewish, he had the Last Supper was a Leil Seder, was a Seder night.
Yes.
And the only people who can partake of the Seder are Jews. So
Yeah.
everyone you see in that picture, they were Jews partaking of the Paschal lamb, which is one of the most important mitzvahs of the year. And they were all
Mm.
there.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was, I look at that and I'm like, wow,
Isn't that cool? And but a lot of Christians, they do the Eucharist, or they take the bread, they take the wine, and they don't realize that that is a ritual rooted in Judaism, that came from Judaism.
right. And like I was saying, the replacement theology, the problem is it gets to the point where they can't, and they've been, it's so deeply ingrained that they can't even see what's in front of them. They
Yeah.
can't see that they're in like really Jerusalem. It's not something we put up for the tourists. It's
Yeah.
like, it's and it has so much relevance for them. It stuns me sometimes that they literally can't even see it. That's and
Yeah.
and if the prophecies happen, well, they'll be unfolding here, and you'll have someone with their cell phone filming the prophecies as they take place. God willing, very soon.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
soon.
That would be awesome. Agreed.
So I did a lot more talking than I usually do doing interviews. So tell me, what is the big um, revelation in your book about the connection between Christianity and Judaism? One family is
Originally,
a very powerful statement.
yes. So here's the big piece. I felt that I felt compelled to write the book after October 7th. So that
Really?
was a big yes. So I'd had the book sort of sitting on the back burner, and after October 7th, I felt like this has to get out there. So I put it all together. I sent it to my editors and I said, "Can you do this in 2 weeks?" Huh. And so they rushed through it, and we got it out. But for me, the big thing living in the United States and seeing anti-Semitism spike 380% in this
Oh
country
boy.
after October 7th, I felt like Christians have forgotten who they are. That was the big thing for me as a Christian when you read the text. So this is the takeaway from the book. As a Christian, when you read the text, it is very clear that Jesus, that Paul or Shaul felt like they were one family with the Jews. That it wasn't like here's this separate branch and we're pushing you guys away or something like that. It was actually we're all one family. Yes, we disagree on certain key like tenets of who we are, but that's why it is two groups. But it's one family together worshiping the same God and trying to do the same kind of things. And I think it's so powerful to recognize that because it means that Christians see Jewish suffering like October 7th, and they're supposed to be moved by that. That it's in the prophet Amos chapter 6. He talks about the suffering of Israel, and he says, and you weren't moved by it. And I think that a lot of Christians miss that whole idea. In the Psalms where it says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem; they will prosper who love you." Like that is a key idea of who Christians are supposed to be. The suffering of Israel is supposed to be felt as their suffering too, because we're one family.
Right. And when it's one family, it's not, yeah, we're right and we won. Essentially, we're working towards the same goal. And like you said, the God of Israel,
Yes.
who we connected with at Sinai and in this land. And I don't see it. And Judaism, pardon me, Judaism does not have proselytizing. It's
Right.
like, on Sukkot, the 70 nations come to Jerusalem, and we don't say, haha, you were wrong. That's why you're here. No, we are the priests. You bring your offering, and I take it up to the Kohanim on the Temple Mount for you.
Yes.
It's if I don't think I don't think you have to say, haha, we're right. God's team won. You so that's
Ah,
why
yeah,
I love that concept of one family. I think it's absolutely, and it's biblical. It is very
yes.
biblical.
It's biblical. And I think what's most powerful about it to me is that ideally, even when a family disagrees, they talk to each other, right? That's the thing. Like it's not families don't force each other into things, which I think has historically been the approach that Christianity has taken. And it shouldn't be like that. But it should just be we talk to each other. Like maybe we agree on a lot of things, we disagree on one thing, so let's talk about it. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be me trying to convert you or something like that, but just talking, just so that we understand where everybody's coming from.
Amen. Amen. Jason, I really can't thank you enough. Um, Professionally, personally, you just made my day.
It's been fun. Thank you very much, Adam.
Don't go away. So, folks, this is going out from Israel. If you bless us, we bless you back. That's the way it works. Um, I personally went right out and ordered Jason's book because, I mean, this is our job. This is what we're supposed to be doing in this generation. It's never happened before, outside of the Christadelphians, that Jews and Christians have come together, and it's the job is right here in front of us. And if we miss it, it'll be tragic. We've got to come together, um,
Yes.
and we've got to come together now. Thank you so much, Jason. Um,
Thanks.
be blessed, y'all.